Hi, I'm Rick Reynolds, founder and president of Affair Recovery. And today I want to talk about how to get your mate to cooperate. Frequently I'm asked, how do I get my mate to maybe stop being verbally abusive, or to address their addiction, or to work with me in parenting, or just be more financially responsible, or to have more or less sex and the sexual issues that we're having? How do I even get them to go talk to a third party, because we just can't seem to work through this? The reason I get those requests is because the mate's just simply not responding to the request their mate's making. It's interesting, Ted Huston, a researcher at the University of Texas, in a study with over 168 couples over 14 years, discovered that the biggest predictor of a split in a couple, it wasn't conflict. Rather, it was a lack of responsiveness. And it's something that we struggle with. I think especially with infidelity, when you're asking your mate to do something and there's lack of responsiveness, there's already the hurt that comes from the fact there's a rupture in the relationship, but there's also the hurt that comes from that lack of responsiveness. We want to know in the long run that we matter to our mate, that we're important to them, that they choose us. And when they don't respond, that's what makes us feel insignificant and unimportant and unloved by them. But sometimes a change in how we approach our mate to get them to do something can be helpful and help us get, in the long run, what we both want. In the newsletter, How to Get Your Mate to Cooperate Without Being Controlling, it talks about a sequence of 3 approaches to address difficult issues with your mate, those crucial conversations. The first that I talk about is just asking. It's simply making a request of your mate to address something, to do something. So asking isn't the same as saying, why in the world didn't you call when you knew you were going to be late? That's not an asking. That's not a request. If something's important to you, it's good for you to even ask if you can ask. One of the things that Steph's really good at is saying, do you mind if we talk about something that I think you're going to be defensive about? Now, that's a great approach that she takes, because when she tells me I'm going to be defensive, there's no way in the world I'm going to be defensive. Instead, I'm going to talk to her. But if you ask if you can bring something up before you even bring up what it is you're going to bring up, and if they say yes, then at one level, they've already agreed to the conversation. So as simple as it may sound, just asking if you can ask. Is it okay if we talk about something? Or do you want to know what my opinion is on this? If they say yes, you go for it. If they say no, then you still have a lot of other options. And they may even come back a little later and say, okay, what is it? So when you're going to bring up something with your mate, and since we're the Affair Recovery Center, let's assume it's about getting counseling because of infidelity, or maybe taking an online course, or reading an article with you, or something like that. The way you might approach it is something like this. Do you mind if I ask you something? If they say yes, then you might say, look, I know you want to be happy. And I know that you really want to have a meaningful relationship. And I want the same. That being said, would you be willing to go, to counseling with me, or to take the EMS online course? Because I want to see if there's something worth salvaging here in our relationship. Now, that's just a simple request. You told them what their argument is for why they're doing what they're doing. So they may or may not respond positively, but you never know until you ask. The second step to me is ultimately telling if the first doesn't work. I think a lot of times we keep asking our mate to do something without ever really telling them how important it is. And because they don't agree with us when we ask, it's almost like they don't catch the imperative nature of what it is we really want them to do, or what we need. The way Stephanie does this is she'll say something like, well, how loud am I going to have to get before you can hear me? Which I know means that we're moving from asking to telling at that point. And I think telling probably sounds something more like this: because I love you and because I want this marriage, I need you to do this course with me. See, that's not a question, it's a statement. It's a good idea to begin with a positive statement, but it's imperative that you end up with what you need. Ending with a need or what's important is what allows them to hear. If you end up with, I really wish you would do this, it's still a request. Then your mate may think you're still asking rather than telling, and will still just kind of feel the freedom to do what they want to do. You haven't put the oomph in it yet. Love always acts in the best interest of another person, and it speaks the truth in love. And that's important to understand before you get to the third step, which, by the way, I think is never done out of anger. But it's the demand. And this isn't the same as being controlling, even though your mate may accuse you of being controlling. But you need to understand, we all have choice. And you can say to them, look, it's your choice to continue to drink, or it's your choice to continue in the affair. That's your choice. And it's my choice to decide whether or not I can put up with that or not put up with that. It's my choice whether or not I want to put up with where things are at, sexually in our relationship. I know you've got a choice to do what you want, but it's my choice to do something different. And simply letting them know that you also have a choice and that you refuse to continue down a destructive path with them, that you don't choose to participate with them in self-destruction, that's love, because lovingly you don't want someone to continue to hurt themselves. And I think a demand probably sounds something like this: if you don't come with me to get help, if you don't do this course with me, if you don't go to the weekend with me, if you don't, do this, then I have a choice to do something else. And what I'm going to do is this. And it carries a strong consequence. So that consequence has to be tied to the demand, or the demand carries no weight. At the same time, I'm not saying that the demand is used with small things. These are for really self-destructive issues. And again, we're addressing infidelity, and that's a big deal. And a demand is something that can be appropriate when it's that self-destructive or that big. Now, if we're just talking about how they squeeze the toothpaste, if you don't start doing this, I'm going to separate from you. That would not quite be where this is one's appropriate. If this type of intervention is done, though, with a motive other than love, which is acting in their best interest, then I think it also doesn't even come across right. They need to know that you're doing this, making this demand because you care for them, not just for yourself. In my mind, you use demand when there's things like infidelity, abuse, addiction, where it's not loving to allow them to continue in destructive patterns. Don't assume you know how your mate's going to respond and refuse to take the risk of speaking up. You never know. And it's certainly not a guarantee that they're going to go along with you. But in the long run, if you do make those requests and they don't respond, if you make those, you tell them what you need, if you make the demand and they still refuse to do it, at least you won't have regrets. For love's sake, have the courage to speak up and address those hard issues with your mate to healing.